All right. Good evening, everybody. Actually, when I first came on, I said good morning, everybody. Good evening. It's actually a good thing we're doing it. We have this chus to learn twice in one day. It's actually good because it's mamash a hemshech of the previous sugya, and it discusses also very nicely many in Yoni Diyoma in terms of this week's parsha and dealing about giving a bris milah. So, anyway, so we left off in the bottom of Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Friday's daf is daf Samach Beis. So we left off at the bottom. Maskalo Ravashi. So my dahai v'chol orel kula mashma. So we had the previous daf. We were discussing a machlokas in terms of a case, which is actually the top line of this page. If you look at the top line, right, this is the shiloh we're discussing. It's shachtu lemulin almanas she's chaper ba'arelim bezrika. He shechted for having in mind that you're going to go ahead and offer it for people who had a bris milah. However, when you're going to do the zrika, you can do the zrika for people who are arelim, people who are not circumcised. People who are not circumcised are not permitted to the Karban Pesach. So what is our case there? And says, I'm just reading the top line of the Gemara. It says Rav Chizda says pasel and Rabbah says kosher. Okay, so that was a machlokas, and they brought a brisa to prove for them. And now we're going to ask on the understanding of that brisa. So the Gemara says, "Samaskal Ravashi, so we might dahai v'chol arel kula mashma." Who says when it says v'chol arel in the pasuk v'chol arel lo yochel bo? It means that you can't have anybody, right? In other words, you can't have everybody being arelim, but if you have some people join, let's say 5 and 5, it would be okay, right? Dilma hai v'chol arel mashma koldu, right? Maybe it means that it says that even for any amount, right? And then kasav rachmana, and then the Torah, then it wrote v'zos da'adika kula arla loy pasla loishna b'shchita loishna b'zrika. And therefore, when it says v'zos, what it means is until it's not puzzle until everybody is an RL, not just 50-50. Everybody is, and it doesn't make a difference during Shechita or the Zrika. In other words, who says the Zos was excluding, right, the Zrika versus the Shechita or vice versa? Perhaps it was excluding a case of when everybody was, unless everybody was an RL, right? If you only have 50-50, then it would be different. So the Gemara says, Elam Ravashi, he gives a different understanding of the machlokes. Elam Rashi, Rav Chizda, V'Rabba, Bahai, Kra Mifli. They're actually arguing on this pasuk, right? The machlokes, right? The case of which, right, we started off today with, right, that I just mentioned before between Rav Chizda and Rabba, it stems from this pasuk. Pasuk says, "V'nirtza lo l'chaper lo." The pasuk says regarding karbanos, regular karbanos, v'nirtza lo, right? It knows it'll be accepted for him l'chaper lo, to be mechaper upon him. Alav v'lo al chavero. So in other words, it teaches you that the carbon must be alav for the person who's offering it, and not for anybody else. So Rav Savar Chavero Dumir Didei Mahu Tvar Kapara or Af Chavero Tvar Kapara. So too, just like he is somebody who requires kapara, so too the person along with him, right, is going to be somebody who requires kapara, right? And therefore, and I guess, and therefore, in other words, Rabbah is right. So Rabbah said, "Chaveru dum d'diyei mahu devar kapara, af chaveru devar kapara." And therefore, la fuke hai orel delav bar kaparu, and that would exclude an orel who can't be included, right? That would exclude somebody who's an orel. And then Rav Chizda saver hai orel nami kevan debar chiyuvahu, since he lamaisa he is somebody who is commanded to go ahead and bring a Karban Pesach. So therefore, kevan debar chiyuvahu bar kaparu, he's considered to be somebody who can get kapara, and there are hoel diboy masakin nafshi. Therefore, he can go ahead and be masakin himself. So therefore, that he would be counted, I guess, towards the his counting of it would be considered towards the carbon. And since the person is not considered to be fit for the carbon, i.e., he's an RL, so therefore, Rav Chizda would say he is pasul, right? So another, or it pasels the carbon. So Now, and so we see from over here that so Rabba and Rav Chiza are arguing on the matter of this case whether you have, in addition to the owner who is fit, basically another person, an Arel or a Relim, who are not fit if that passes it. So now the Gemara asks, Umi Islay Rav Chizda Hoil. Now we saw this concept earlier. We saw the concept of Hoil of since, right? Since I can do this, since if this happens, I can do, since if A happens, then I can do B, such as V'ha'itmar, we learn Ha'ifim Yantav L'chol, right? We saw this case maybe a week or two ago. One who goes ahead and bakes from Yantav until Chol. Now we know that a person cannot go ahead and bake something on Yantav to be used after Yantav. And Rav Chizda Amar Loika, and Rabba Amar Loika. Rav Chizda, he himself says you get Malkus, and Rabba says you don't get Malkus. Rabba Amar Loika, Amina Hoyel Miklele Orchim Chazile, Hashinami Chazile. Rabba says you don't get Malkus, so you go ahead and you bake from Yantif and Chol. Why? Because if someone shows up at the end of Yantif, I can say, oh, that food is for him. So therefore, since, right, this concept of Hoil means since someone could come and I can say it's for them, therefore it's mutter. And Rav Chizda Amar Loika, Lo Amina Hoil. And Rav Chizda says you don't say Hoil. So how can because Rav Chizda says we don't use the svara of saying, oh, since someone will come, it will happen. So why do you call the person who has not had a bris milah somebody who is fit, right? Somebody who is subject towards the Korban Pesach, right? Why? Because since he can get a bris milah, he would be obligated to read Korban Pesach, and therefore he would passel it. Well, I thought we just said that we don't say the concept of since, right? Since someone comes to my house, I can go, therefore I can bake now just in case someone comes. So Bishlam Rabba, the Rabba like Kasha. So Gemara says first on Rabba, it's not a contradiction because by us he doesn't say Hoil, and over there he does say Hoil. Why? Over there, all you need to do is people to show up to the house, right? There's nothing for you to do, right? You call people, say, yo, come over here, take some of these cookies I just baked, right? So that's not a Maisa, right? That's a Dibur. But over here, to say that somebody is now obligated on the Korban Pesach, well, you need a bris milah. To go ahead and get a bris milah, that's a Maisa. So since that's a Maisa, so it makes sense that you don't say, since you could have done a Maisa, to that far we don't say. So since you could have said something is one thing, but not since you could have done a Maisa, that doesn't work. Elo the Rav Chizda kasha, but rather Rav Chizda is a kasha. So we saw his answer earlier. Somebody say ki less like Rav Chizda hoyel lekula. Only when does he not say hoyel lekula? In other words, over there to say that no, it's usher to go ahead and bake in yantif, or we're not going to give you a kula to say that if you baked it, you don't get malchus because if someone came afterwards, then you can serve them that food. So too in this case, l'chumra isle, but he holds l'chumra. So therefore, in our case, we'll say since the guy could get a bris milah, therefore he would be counted towards the if the guy had in mind he's a bar chiyuv, and since he's a bar chiyuv, right, because he could get a circumcision, so therefore he would ruin it would pass on the Korban Pesach. Now, Omar le Marzutra Bere Derav Mari Leravina. Now, we saw this brisa yesterday. It was used for the proof, and now we're going to go ahead and explain this brisa. So Ketani says over there, Hoil v'orla paselis v'tuma paselis. So while we were trying to prove the answer between, right, on Samach Aleph and Beis, right, while we were trying to discuss Rav Chizda and Rabba's svaras, so we want to learn what happens when you have partial, right? Now, when I say partial, it means the Korban Pesach is shechted for a number of people. So if you have half, we'll just say it is half, just for argument's sake, right? It doesn't make a difference whether it's one or the majority or minority, doesn't make a difference, right? We'll just say half, right? So it makes a difference if half of them are tameh, half of them are non-circumcised, right? So those are the issues we discussed. So he said, "Ketani hoyev orla paselis v'tum paselis," right? An orla, person is uncircumcised, it passes, and so does if the person is tameh. And ma tuma lo asa maisa lo asa ba mikzas tuma b'chol k'chol tuma af orla lo asa mikzas arla b'chol arla. So he said, just like tuma, right? If you only have if half the people there are tameh, it's okay. So too, if half the people are arelim, are uncircumcised, then also, right? It's not mikzas arla. So it doesn't make a difference. It's okay. It will still be kosher. So hi tuma hechidami. So now, what's this case of comparing? If half the people are quote unquote tummy, that was the way I explained it, right? So, but let's analyze it. So, hi tuma hechidami. Ilema, the Tumas Gavri. If we're talking about, as Yoel just explained, we're talking about the people are tummy and half the people are tummy and half the people are not. My loasaba mixas tuma tuma. So what does it mean when he says, right, we don't make half of them like all of them? Diika arba v'chamisha gavi tamein, v'arba chamisha gavi tahar. If you're going to say, let's say four or five people are tamei, 4 or 5 people are tahor, like possibly tumei lataharim. So people are not puzzle, right? Like I suggested. So gabi or nami. Haloi pasi. Also, when it comes to orla, whether a person was circumcised or not, right? It's now we learn the Mishnah Mulan Relim Kasher. When it comes to people who got bris milah or didn't, it's kasher. So ma'ishna tuma the pshitale, ma'ishna or the misale. So if they're both the same understanding, why are we learning, right? If half the people are circumcised from the case of half the people are tahor, right? What makes that case of where half the people were tahor so obvious that you can shech the Korban Pesach with them in mind? It's not an issue. So Ella, rather, maybe that's not the case. Maybe we're talking about tumas basar. We're talking about not the individuals are tamei. 5 of the people are tahor, 5 of the people are tamei. Rather, part of the Korban Pesach becomes tamei. Right? Ella of the tumas basar. Well, my loss about mixas tuma chol tuma. What does it mean that you don't make partial tuma just like the all tuma? Dilu tamei chad me'evarim. And if because one of the limbs become tamei, so hi ditmei sarfinale v'ida chachlinale, right? Because you can say over there that the part which was tamei, you go ahead and burn. The other parts can be eaten. So just like over there by tumas basar, it's divided. I.e., if a limb becomes tamei, you can go ahead and discard it and burn it, but the rest of you can use it. So too, if you can say by orla that if half the people are arelim, the other half are mulin, it would be okay. So b'mayim kimta, so b'tumas basar, so ema sefer. Let's look at the sefer, the brayso that we saw today. So darin davar she'eno noheg b'chol zvachim, davar she'eno noheg b'chol zvachim. So then we said, okay, which one do we compare it to? Do we compare it to zman, right, during the time, or do we compare it to tuma? So we said over there, darin davar she'eno noheg b'chol zvachim, davar she'eno noheg b'chol zvachim. Let's compare something that does not apply across the board by all other karbanos, like by an orel, right? There's no special halacha that they can't do it, and so too by tamei, that the orel and tamei have a special halacha when it comes to Korban Pesach, because by Korban Pesach they can't send a kohen to go ahead and offer their korban, but if they wanted to go ahead and bring a chatas, they could. So it's a special halacha, right, which is not noheg b'chol zvachim, and don't learn zman shenoy b'chol zvachim. But when it comes to zman, to have to think about the wrong time of the offering, so that is problematic all across the board, whether it's the Korban Pesach, whether it's a chatas, an olah, anything. So that, and therefore it's a little different. And now my tuma. So we said, okay, tuma is similar to arel, that it only applies to Korban Pesach. So my tuma. So inema tumas basar. If the tuma that, like we just said in the reisha that you just suggested, is referring to the tumas basar, that basically one of the limbs become tamei. That applies not just to Korban Pesach, it applies to every korban. So obviously, must be talking about tumas gavri. And what does it mean that it's not knowing by other karbanos? When it comes to other karbanos, a person who's not circumcised or somebody who's tamei can go ahead and send his korban with a kohen to go ahead and offer it. But when it comes to the Korban Pesach, arel the tamei ein mashlichim b'seichem. They can't go ahead and send their Korban Pesach. They can't be part of a group. So if that's the case, this part of the brayso was talking about tumas adam, and the other part was talking about tumas basar. So reisha b'tumas basar v'sei b'tumas gavri. So oftentimes what the Gemara does is the first teretz is amarli in yes, right? Shem tuma kaparach. They're asking both of them are general cases of tuma, and therefore yes, even though one case is tumas basar and the sefer is tumas gavri, nevertheless we just call it tuma, and therefore it's not a contradiction. Or b-boy same, or I can say no, really it's all the same. It's the same type of tuma. And seifa nami b'tumas basar. Really, the seifa is talking about tumas basar. Umay in noi b'chol zvachim. What does it mean that it's not noi b'chol tumas zvachim? If you have one piece that comes tamei, right? L'chayra, any other korban you can discard that, and the rest is good. So it says no. Dilu b'chol zvachim bein shenitma chelev basar kayim ubein shenitma basar v'chelev kayim. Whether the chelev, right, the fats are supposed to be burnt on his bag become tamei, and the meat that he's allowed to eat is okay, or the meat that he was allowed to eat became tamei, but the chelev is okay. Then Zorik es Adam, a person allowed to go ahead and finish up and offer and sprinkle the blood. Zorik es Adam. V'ilu b'Pesach. However, why is it different by Korban Pesach? Nitma chelev ubasar kayim. If the case of that the chelev became tamei and the basar is kayim is around, then Zorik es Adam. Then you can go ahead and throw the blood. However, nitma basar v'chelev kayim. But by Korban Pesach, if the basar became tamei and the only thing that was good was the fats that go on the Mizbeach, you can't go ahead and throw the blood because over there the main part is that which is eaten by the individual who's bringing it, and therefore, so the halachas of tumas basar are actually unique when it comes to Korban Pesach, because if the basar becomes tamei, then you have to go ahead and discard the korban. You can't go ahead and be zarek es adam. Okay, so now b'mayukimta. Okay, so you want to say the tumas basar. You say okay, good, very good. Both cases, the Reish and the Sefer, both time on tumas basar. So ema seifa. Let's say the end of the sefer, right? So ema seifa. It says done in davar shaloi hutar michlalo midavar shalu hutar michlalo. Another surah was right that we should learn something that does not have some which is never permitted from something which is never permitted, i.e., an RL and zman. We said the zman is something it's never permitted. If you think about the wrong time, even if it's partial, it's no good, right? Don't learn out tuma sharei hutra michlalo, because we say tuma is hutra michlalo. So now, what type of tuma is that? B'mai. What type of ilema? If we're talking about a case, turn the page in top of Samach Beis and Beis, ilema b'tumas basar. If we're talking about tumas basar, as we suggested before, that when we said tuma, there was talking about tumas basar. Say heicha hutra. Where do we see that tumas basar is okay? We never saw that. Ella pshita b'tumas gavri. Rather, it's obviously we're talking about tumas gavri. We're talking about the people are tamei, and that has a special case where we say, okay, it's not a problem that you're tamei. In what case is that? But tzibur, right? That's when you have the majority of the people become tamei, and they say you can still bring the Korban Pesach anyways. So reisha b'tumas basar, seva b'tumas gavri. So you can tell me that the reisha, the first two cases, are talking about tumas basar, and over here is talking about tumas gavri. So once again, the Gemara says, "In shem tuma kaparach." Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's not such a contradiction. It just says tuma in general. It doesn't have to be referring to the same type of tuma. Or one could say no. Kula tumas tumas basar. Really, we are talking about tumas basar. So I think we're talking about tumas basar. So where do you see that it's hutra by the Korban Pesach? Behecha hutra. So betumas Pesach. The time we learn in the Mishnah, Pesach haba betuma, necha betuma shelo ba b'chasla el lachilo. If a Pesach was brought in Tuma, it can be eaten by Betuma because it was only brought for the reason to be eaten, and then since that person was Tameh and therefore was able to eat it, he would allow to go ahead and in that special case. That's referring to the case of Rav Tzibur. Right, Rav Tzibur, if it's brought Betuma, then he's allowed to go ahead and eat it because then it was permitted. Fine. Now, next case. So, Meisiv Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yeshua. HaPesach Shavra Shnaso. You have a Korban Pesach whose year has passed. In other words, the animal's too old. He's supposed to be within its first year. It got old. Or Shachtu Bizmano Lishmo. Or it was shechted bismano, right? It was shechted during its proper time, right? So it was shechted in its proper time. So Pesach Shavuot Shnaso, it was shechted bismano lishmo, and then it was shechted in its proper time lishmo for the purpose of Korban Pesach. And so too ashechet acherim l'shem Pesach bismano, or someone takes another korban, something was, let's say, set aside as a korban toda, and then he goes ahead and he shechs it on the 14th of Nisan for a korban for Pesach. Rebbe Eliezer Paisel. Rabbi Shua Machshir. Rabbi Eliezer says it's possible, it's no good, and Rabbi Shua, will soon see why, says he's Machshir. So first, according to Rabbi Eliezer, so he says Tama Bismano. The reason why it's okay, or excuse me, the reason why it's possible in this case is Shechta Bismano. All right, we said Bismano Lishmo. Tama Bismano. Ha Shlo Bismano Kasher. But if it was not in its time, i.e., he did it, let's say 2 months earlier, right? It would be kosher. Why did you say the svara? Since it was bismano, it would have been Since if he did it bismano, right? Hoil bismano puzzle. Since he would when he did it in his time, so therefore it should also be puzzle shalom bismano. So we said earlier that if you subscribe to the svara of Hoil, why don't we say Hoil in this case? Because since if you would have done it, name a Hoil bismano puzzle, shalom bismano nami puzzle. It should also be puzzle. You shouldn't say it's good because it could have been brought on the 14th and it wouldn't puzzle then. So therefore it should always be puzzle. So Amarav Papa, no, Shani Hassan, Damarakar, the Pasuk says, the Amartam Zevach Pesach Hu Be'aviyaso. So it means over there, only the way it is, Lo Hu L'Shum Acherim, in other words, V'lo L'Acherim Lishmo. In other words, this carbon can't be for other carbonos, and other carbonos can't be for it. Bismano, Shu Pasul, L'Shum Acherim, Acherim Pasul Lishmos. And therefore, if it's Bismano during the time of the 14th, then it's Pasul if it's for other, if you shechler for other, or carbonos, or other carbonos, you are puzzle if you do it for it. However, shalom bismano, if it's not on the 14th, then shu kasher l'shem acherim, then you can go ahead and offer your korban pesach on, let's say, in 2 months earlier for a shlomim. So too acherim ksherim l'shmo. So too the other ones would be kasher lishmo if it was for if it was something else. It would be kasher if it was done for the shem pesach. If that was a shlomim, was done the shem pesach, it was 2 months earlier, like we said earlier today. 2 wrongs make a right when it comes to the korban pesach, because if you have it shelo bismano and you also have it in addition to shelo bismano, you also have it. It was a different korban. Then it would be those are the 2 wrongs. Now, new case. Rabbi Simloi also lekami Rabbi Yechanan. One time Rabbi Simloi came before Rabbi Yechanan. Omerle nisni limar sefer yuchsin. Let's go ahead and learn sefer yuchsin, a special sefer they had. All different halachas. So he said, let's learn Sefer Yuchsin. Samarlei, Mehechanad, where are you from? Samarlei, Milud, the Hecha Masvech, and where are you living, where are you learning? But Nahardia, he says, I was born in Lud, but now I live in Nahardia. So he said, Amarlei, said back to him, Ein Nidainin Ludim Lo Nahardin, right? We don't go ahead and teach the Sefer Yuchsin to people either from Lud or people from Nahardia. And certainly that you're from Lud and you live and you learn in Nahardia, I'm not going to go ahead and learn it with you. Nevertheless, he's forcing him, and he said, okay, fine, I'll teach you. So let's go ahead and make a seam in 3 months. We'll finish in 3 months. It'll be good then. So Shagokala in Pasuk Bay, so he took a piece of dirt and he threw it at him. He says, Amarlei, how could you go ahead and learn it all in 3 months? Uma Bruria de Beisir de Rabbi Meir. Bruria, who is the wife of Rabbi Meir, and Barti de Rabbi Yechanan de Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan, and the daughter of Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan. And she was a big Talmida Chacham. And the Tanya, Tlas Mea Shmaitza, Kiyayim Metlas Mea Ravasya, Yafilu Hachi Lo Yotza, Yidechavasa Betlas Shanan, right? She would learn 300 halachos from 300 different teachers, right, in a day. And nevertheless, it took her 3 years to go ahead. She didn't finish in 3 years. You want to learn all in 3 months, right? She learned all of that in 3 years, was able to finish it. You want to learn everything, Sefer Yuchs, in 3 months? Doesn't make sense. So he says, Kishakav Yazo, he said, okay, when he's leaving, Amarle, Rabbi, ma bein, at least teach me this halacha. Ma bein lishmo v'shelo lishmo. Why is there a difference by karbonos, right? If something was offered lishmo or shelo lishmo, in other words, that can go ahead and ruin a carbon, as opposed to a la'ichlav shelo la'ichlav. If you go ahead, and as we taught by our Mishnah, right? If you go ahead and you have in mind for people who, let's say, who can't eat and can't eat altogether, right? Some people are sick and others are healthy. As long as there's healthy people, part of the chabura, then it would be okay. So what's the difference? Why is shelo lishmo that ruin it? But when it comes to people la'ichlav shelo la'ichlav, that does not ruin it. So since you're Talmid Chacham, I'll go ahead and I'll teach this. I'll learn this with you. So lishmo, v'shelo lishmo, psula begufa. There's a couple of things wrong with it. First of all, it's psula beguf. If you go ahead and you have in mind for lishma, let's say not during Pesach, if you want it for Korban Pesach, or if it's on the 14th and you think you want it to be your shlamim, this ruins it. It's a psul begufa. It ruins it itself, right? And we're going to explain this. But however, when it comes to, if you have in mind this is going to be for people who are eating and non-eaters, right? That doesn't passel it itself. You have shar levar isuro. When it comes to lishma, you can't go ahead and separate the isur, right? However, lo'echlav shalachlav, efshar levar isuro. You can go ahead and different people to say that, okay, you get this part and then you get this part of the animal. So you get one leg and you get the other leg, and therefore the legs can be divided, one to people who can't eat it. Therefore, maybe that part's no good, but the part to someone who's eat it, you can separate it, and therefore it doesn't pass the whole thing. You can separate it. And lishma v'shalil yeshna barba avodos. That applies to all four avodos. If you go ahead and you have wrong kavanas, wrong intentions during any of the four avodos, right? Shchita, Kabbalah, Zrika, or Halicha and Zrika, any of those four, then we say over there, but your intentions for those who are eating or those who can't eat, right, is not during the four avodos. And and over there we have lishma shelo lishma, that can applies by karbanas tzibur. However, that doesn't apply by karbanas tzibur, right? It's not eaten by the masses, and therefore it does not apply to that. So Rashi Amar, first of all, by the way, psula b'gufo, the efshar levar isuro, that which you say that it now becomes intrinsically usher, and that which we say that you're able to go ahead and separate and say, okay, this is for this leg was for the eaters, and this part, the hind leg was for the non-eaters. Chadamilsi, that's actually one thing. It's not a separate matter. It's one thing. Why? Now, what's the reason why we say that the reason is that psul b'guf is because you can't go ahead and separate it. But since you can go ahead and separate it, like when it comes to eichlav, therefore it's not psul b'gufo. And Omar Rami bar Rav Yudi Omar Rav miyoyim shenignas sefer yuchsin. By the way, students, sefer yuchsin tashash keichan shachamim. They became weak. They become or name, and their eyes couldn't see as bright. And Omar Marzutra says Marzutra bein eitzel le'eitzel tino dalamea gamli dedarsha. So he says between these two psukim, they're brought on the side. One is in Divrei Yamim Aleph Perek Ches. Lamed Ches, and the other one is Divrei Yamim, also Aleph Perek Tes, basically one Perek later, and it says over there between these two psukim, right? Which I'm not even sure what the. Let me see Rashi for a second. Parsha Gedola B'neiyan, right? Okay, I guess so. It talks about over there, I guess, six different sons, but basically the amount that's said over there, right, in this basically one parak was 400 wagon loads of svaras and halachas and limudim, and that's how much was darshaned over there. So you see how much the Sefer Yuchsin, it was so much, right? Just even this one parak, they were able to go ahead and basically have 400 wagon loads or camel loads of chidushim on that parak. All right, we'll stop here. Shkoyach, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. Tomorrow morning, Mitzvah Shem, those of you who are able to, I'll be davening over at the Aguda, 7 o'clock. Obviously, masks and social distancing downstairs, and then we'll have the bris, and then afterwards there'll be, I guess, food to go for those of you who want to go ahead and have your bagels and lox to go. So,
Mazel tov.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for
Shalom,
joining,
everybody.
All right, have a good night and a good Shabbos.
What time
Shabbos?
What time Shabbos?
Shacharis, I'm going to be at the Aguda at 7 o'clock as Shacharis there.
And Daf Yomi Sunday regular time.
Daf Yomi 7 o'clock regular time. Shkoyach.
Okay.